Unconventional Life, welcome. This is a in-person home video, literally at my house in Boulder, Colorado. This is Ret Taylor that I've got sitting next to me, who's actually been in the area for a really long time. And we were about to do this interview in person, and it was like, are you in Boulder? Oh, I'm in Boulder. Let's come do this together. And so for those of you that don't know Ret, he is the CEO and co-founder of NED, which is a wellness brand producing CBD oils, different hemp products, hemp bombs, all those goodies we're going to talk about in just a little bit. And he's been running that company for the last 2 years and have had quite a bunch of success with it, and really being known as one of the most transparent companies in the industry. And, you know, really learning more about burnout and anxiety. And I know your mother had cancer, and that was a large part of the origin story here. But I know for myself, I've seen such an impact with CBD type products. And I know literally today you also left your other company, which you've been running for 9 years?
12 years.
12 years. So yeah. This is kind of a monumental episode. This is like the unveiling of full time of NED, even though it's been a few years in. So welcome to the show, and fill in any gaps I might have left out, and give us a glimpse into your personal life.
Yeah, well, thanks first of all for having me. It's an honor, and it's just such a blessing for us to have a platform like this and to be able to speak with you. You know, we do things very differently, and it's tough in the industry that we're in to really be able to convey all those extra steps and extra costs that we incur to do things right. So thanks for the platform, and thanks for having me over to your house. Beautiful. It's super beautiful. Meeting your the cat and dog, and lovely.
Yeah, totally. So just to give you guys a little bit idea of NED, so Ret brought this over. We're going to share a little bit more about this later, but this is like this beautiful box. And just to get an idea of it, yeah, we live in Colorado, but it doesn't mean that, you know, hemp and CBD isn't available in other places as well. But it's just this really, you know, unique, different hemp oils and different bombs and all kinds of stuff, but we'll share more about that later. And we'll, for those that are listening on audio, make sure to come to our website, unconventionallifeshow.com, and catch us on the video. And so, you know, Ret, tell me a little bit about like where this journey began. I know you, your mother was a really big influence in it. I know there's a lot of phases of your journey, but why CBD? Why hemp oil? Why prioritize transparency? Why even the way you package, the way you bottle? Why go through those steps? Like, what's your bigger why?
Yeah, well, the bigger why, and I like the way you phrased it. There are a lot of steps through the journey, and there certainly are. Really, one of the pivotal ones was my mom's diagnosis of breast cancer back in end of 2014. And they caught it very early, and she had great doctors. She had a double mastectomy. And then they said, we really want you to do radiation, and that will drop your chances of having cancer again by 5%. And she said, well, you know, for 5%, I'm not going to take my body through radiation, and I'm going to instead just battle cancer through nutrition and movement and positive thinking. And that was her decision. And that honestly scared me to death.
Yeah, it's a bold one.
It's a bold one.
To go that route.
The scariest part, though, was I knew that my mom really didn't know what that meant, to battle cancer through nutrition. She didn't know what an antioxidant was. And so, you know, Jules and I, we live here in Boulder, and we're surrounded by amazing experts in all types of health, from conventional to unconventional. And I went out and I did a deep dive into what it meant to battle cancer through nutrition. And then later on, what it meant to really thrive through nutrition. And I spoke with a number of great people. And one of the things that kept coming up over and over for my mom was cannabinoids, full spectrum cannabinoids. CBD is one of them. It's one of 100 plus. And so I started buying CBD, or full spectrum hemp oil, from Alfalfa's, which is one of the first grocery stores in America to start carrying. We love Alfalfa's, but I just couldn't find any sort of like loyalty or affinity towards any of the brands at the time because I didn't know why. I didn't know their why. I didn't know why they were doing it, how they were doing it, how they were growing their hemp or how they were extracting, what the other ingredients were. And so I spent 2 years like just bouncing from one brand to the next. And eventually this time, 2 years ago, I wanted to create my own for my mom, for myself, for my friends. And I went out and I started meeting with hemp farmers all over Colorado. And this was just a fun thing for me to do. I love connecting with people. I like to drive country roads. So this is kind of perfect. And I met a bunch of farmers. I think I met 8 of them, maybe seven farmers. And they were all good people and they were good farmers, but they were growing their hemp very much for quantity instead of quality.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't really resonating with me. And at the same time, I kept hearing about this mythological farmer in Paonia, Colorado, which is on the western slope. It's in this valley that's just very famous among chefs and farmers for producing some of the best produce in the country. And I kept hearing about this guy, Kurt, who was the best hemp farmer in Colorado. And I finally connected with him. It turns out my sister knew him. And I finally, on this like glorious September day with all the aspens in full gold, drove onto his property and met Kurt. And I immediately knew he was our guy.
Wow. And
he grows much more for quality. Mm-hmm. So he's all about the quality. He was a marijuana farmer for a decade plus. He grew some of the best marijuana there was. And then he wanted to get on the other side of the law.
Yeah.
And grow instead of in basements on a big farm. And that's what he does. And he brings the same amount of care, detail, attention, love, gratitude to his plants that he did to his marijuana plants. And so he purifies the already pure mountain water. He plays binaural beats and reggae to his plants. He makes his own soil and fertilizers, his own pesticides. Everything's organic. He's in fact going way above and beyond organic, and he's getting biodynamically certified, which includes moon cycles.
It's a whole biodynamic wine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's much more to it than just the science behind the farming. There's the understanding too that there's a spiritual side to it. So Kurt is our guy, and that's where we get 100% of our hemp from.
Wow. And let's just, for the listeners that, maybe we can distinguish, like these terms, right? Hemp, CBD, marijuana, like, and I think there's a whole world of it. And in Colorado, I think to some degree, we can become privileged because it is legal here. And so it is more common conversational domain. And just to kind of break down, like, let's just distinguish these terms for the listeners.
All right. So CBD is one of 100 plus compounds in hemp or marijuana, but it's much more predominant in hemp plants. In marijuana plants, the dominant compound or cannabinoid is THC, and THC is the only compound that will get you high. Hemp, there's very little THC. So CBD again is it's the more famous one because it's really kind of like the lead singer in the band.
Yeah.
And you can get some benefits from the lead singer, right? Acapella is cool. But if you've got the drummer and the bass player and the guitarist and maybe violinists and, the light guy and the group, the roadies, it all comes together to make a much better performance. And that's the way all the other cannabinoids work with CBD. So other cannabinoids are like CBN, CBG, and CB down the line. So
yeah.
Did I touch on?
Yeah. So for the list to frame it, so it's non-psychoactive.
Non-psychoactive, right?
And some of the benefits of CBD.
Well, it's a supplement. So we're really not able to comment on make medical claims.
Sure. This is no medical claim.
Yeah,
please do.
But I can say what most of our customers come to us for, and that would be, I think the main one is for sleep. Yeah. So it really helps with sleep, and I see that every night next to me with my wife, who Never slept well, but now she does. And I can always tell when she forgets to use our products because she sleeps not so well.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And my business partner, Adrian, uses our products mainly for anxiety that he's battled. Joint and muscle pain is a big one.
Yeah.
And then inflammation, or reducing inflammation, is a big one. And that's really why I use our products.
Yeah. I know for myself, so I had a big, journey with snowboarding and had 6 concussions and fractured vertebrae. And I've actually found CBD personally to really help with brain inflammation. And I noticed that when I am pushing myself, as naturally we can do at times in our life, that having CBD regularly actually has my longevity last longer. My performance is better. And I find I'm just becoming more replenished, I guess.
Yeah.
And less depleted as
Yeah.
I move on. So,
yeah, that's exactly the case. And that's, again, why I use it. It's really more of like a whole health regime for me.
Yeah.
And it's important to say too that it's not like the silver bullet. It should be used in conjunction with a great diet and movement and positivity. So it's not the one thing. If you're going out drinking all night long and eating processed food all day long, that is not going to cut it.
Totally. So let's zoom out for a minute here. And, let's say, so you got this idea, you find the farmer, you find Kurt, you're like, all right, Mom, I got the good CBD product.
Yeah.
I got this thing that works. How does one go about taking that as a concept or an idea and then turning it into a brand?
Yeah.
And actually getting, and I know you're 2 years in, right? So I don't imagine you've got it all figured out, but at the same time, it's, it takes something.
Yeah.
And so what were from that moment of Kurt into where you guys have grown today, if you could just break down some of the steps.
So, the key word there was you guys. How did you guys do this? Because as soon as I found Kurt, and then I found the best extraction facility in all of Colorado, which extracts using very gentle process, so it maintains the biological profile of the plant, which is what I wanted. As soon as I put those two pieces together, I called up my good friend Adrian. And Adrian is a brand building expert. He's a marketing expert. He's done it in New York, Hong Kong, London, Paris, Manchester. And he is a very, very good storyteller.
Yeah.
And I knew that we would need to be able to tell the story because I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to be transparent. I wanted to create the highest quality product I could in a market that's not entirely about that typically. So how did we get from there to here? I brought Adrian in, and I was super fortunate to catch him at the right time in his life. He had an anxiety attack in front of his entire company.
Wow.
2.5 years prior. He was giving a routine presentation to his staff, and his life, it all just kind of started. He had a realization at that point that it wasn't working for him. Yeah. He was very much leading the conventional life, very much about following the things that our generation was told to follow. Wearing the suit and tie, pursuing money, toys, all those things, and succeeding in all of that. Okay. And it all came crashing down one random day, and that led him to a 2-year quest to really figure things out. And in that quest, he really leaned into nature and travel and uncomfortable experiences. And he would be another great guest. But he had just landed back in Colorado. He decided that's where he wanted to be, and everything came together well. We went on a hike, and we actually climbed South Arapahoe Peak, which you can
see out the window.
We can see out that window. And it was on that trip that we put the principles together, the ethos, and really developed what we wanted NED to be. Yeah. And it's really not just a CBD company. We wanted to develop a natural remedies company, a company for people like my mom who wanted alternative medicine, alternative health, could come to for a better first line of defense. And And that's what we're working on. And we started with CBD,
Mm-hmm.
full spectrum hemp oil, because it's here in our backyard.
Yeah.
But we're in development on several other natural remedies.
Yeah, cool. So going from that, once you've conceptualized it and all that, has it been challenging for you and, the team to find those strategic partnerships and even to say, we've got, case in point, this beautifully, packaged bottle or this beautifully, packaged butter or whatever it is to then like sell it essentially. And like any just tidbits you could give for those that are starting off in,
Sure.
And this is a whole world, right, of product distribution, all those things. But just any things if you look back on, you're like, yeah, that was like a pivotal moment, or that was a needle mover. Any of those suggestions you can share?
Yeah, well, our two of the principles we developed on that hike were to keep things entirely simple as possible, and to keep things natural. Yeah. So at every juncture, do the natural step. So keeping things simple. We launched with only a few SKUs instead of, the 9 that we thought about, and the dog treats and this and that. We kept it really simple to just launching with 4 different SKUs, and that was it. Yeah. And then we kept everything entirely natural, the way Mother Nature created, which has resonated with a lot of people, and it's what resonates for me. I don't want to be in a business that doesn't any other way. So, but then, and then we worked with good people. We've spent money. Yeah. We have worked with who we felt would be the best, as opposed to the best for our bank account. Sure. And my partner and I were bootstrapping it. Yeah. So we're always focused on the numbers, but we're always focused on the ROI. And we'll spend as much as we need to, as long as we know that there will be a return, or have a good chance of that.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to zoom out for a moment, because I know, as I said in the introduction, that this is actually, today is the day that, you have actually transitioned out of your other company, and that you started about 12 years ago and are full time in this. So like, what a moment to be here with all of us and, reflecting upon that. But if we kind of zoom out, and if we were a fly on the wall to different snapshots, along your journey, maybe even before that company was started, like who would we have seen? Who was like the world of Ret? Like if we even looked at like, in high school, were you like the nerd science guy, or were you like athlete, or were you musical? Like what would have been some of the defining moments that have led you, to this one, really?
Yeah, that's funny. My dad asked me the same question last night. But defining moments. Well, I went to University of Colorado, and one of my best friends at school was a guy named Badr Fayez, and Badr is from Saudi Arabia, and his dad owns a huge architecture, engineering, and design firm in Saudi Arabia. And he was asked by the Minister of Environment to create an environmental company, basically handing him a monopoly in Saudi Arabia. And he said yes, as you do when you're handed a monopoly. And this was back in 2001, and he said, oh, man, I don't know anybody involved in the environment. And then my buddy Badr, he said, I have this friend at school who took some environmental policy classes. He really likes the outdoors, and he recycles. And so the next thing I knew, after graduating, I was on a flight to Saudi Arabia, first class, and I land, and my business card says environmental expert. And I'm 22 years old. I'm like a few weeks out of school. But that was a pivotal time for me. Yeah. And I spent the next 2 years living in Saudi Arabia, building that company. And really doing so from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I didn't have much oversight. That was my gig. And I've really stayed more or less entrepreneurial ever since. Certainly since 2006, when I co-founded the Brazilian Green Building Council. We brought LEED certification to Brazil. Yeah.
So you go from Saudi Arabia to Brazil. And I think New York appeared somewhere in the journey, and then maybe back to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, Saudi to South Beach, which was like a welcome change. Yeah. And then it wasn't so welcome. Yeah. And then to Brazil with the girlfriend. Really just the economy had crashed in 2006 in South Florida. And yeah, I was gonna go to business school and get very much conventional. And I was dating a wonderful woman from Brazil, and she asked me if I would join her in moving down there. And I thought about it for a couple hours. And 2 weeks later, I'd sold everything, and I was on my way to Brazil.
You're like, Brazil sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and it was good. Brazil is an amazing country. And as soon as I landed, I tried to join the Green Building Council, which I'd been a part of in the U.S. And I realized that there wasn't one.
Yeah.
But there was a list of 5 people who had been trying to start it, and with their emails. And I emailed each of them day one, like, same day I arrived.
You had a mission.
Yeah. And one woman got back to me, and she said, I've been trying to start it for 2 years. I'm about to give up. It's not happening. And I said, well, maybe I could help. And she said, okay, then let's meet. And she said, I'll send a car for you tomorrow. And this beautiful black BMW shows up the next day. And I opened the door, and it was the heaviest door I'd ever felt. And it was a bulletproof BMW.
Wow.
And I get in, and we drive like 45 minutes outside of Sao Paulo, and go into this big gated community. And there's these huge houses, and there's guys with machine guns. And we drive all the way up the mountain to the top, to the biggest house. And stopped there, and it turned out this woman, who is a dear friend to this day, Tess Vanek, she was the honorary consul to the Thai embassy.
Wow.
And her husband was at the time the CEO or the president of DuPont in Latin America. So she was incredibly well connected, but really not into the administrative side of things. So I took care of that. She brought in all the bigwigs, and we raised a bunch of money, and we kicked it off. And now today, 13 years later, it's like the voice for sustainability. We've got over 1,000 LEED certified buildings in Brazil. So I'm pretty proud of that. And that was a pivotal meeting as well.
Completely. And then, if it brings us up to the present, why transition, from these different successes, and even, this other company you've been running where you've been talking, you're like, that has me set financially. I could just keep doing this path. And I know a lot of you listeners can relate to that. If I look at my trajectory, logically, it checks up all the boxes. It makes all the sense in the world. Yet I would imagine there's something in you that wasn't repping the right way. That's like, looks good, seems good, but something doesn't totally feel good.
It didn't. And for a long time, I struggled with that. And I thought I was ungrateful. I thought I was I don't know. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I wasn't happy. And like you said, it was very simple, very easy. I could work 30 hours a week and make hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was at the top of my field, enviable position among all my competitors. But it was like soulless, and it was entirely about the money, which really was my pursuit all the way up until my mid-30s. And I grew up with very little money, and I just thought that if I can put money into my life, then all the challenges I had as a child and as a young adult would go away. Yeah. And that was the focus. That was my purpose. So I realized that, and then, going back to the start, you asked what were those, they're multifacets to the journey. So one of the other journeys is I've spent the last 9 years now studying the real effect of having a deep connection with the natural world, what that does to the body and the mind. With the mind body, they're one and the same. But why is it that you have this plant over here? Well, that does something to you. And it's cool and we're fortunate because we live in a time when we can see into the body through modern technology, EKG and MRI. We can see what's firing, which neurotransmitters, which hormones, and we can pinpoint those and then tap into them. So I've spent the last 9 years studying this. And I wanted to, and I found my purpose through that. and that is to help as many people as possible reconnect with nature.
Yeah.
So having found my purpose and having that be so far from alignment with my living didn't feel right. And it just couldn't go on. And so I started NED 2 years ago with Adrian, and I've been working very hard at both companies. And just today, this morning, I informed someone who I love deeply, my very best friend in the world, who I work with.
Yeah.
He's been my best friend since college. I informed him that I'm out, buddy.
Yeah.
And I have had so much nerves around that. I didn't really sleep well last night.
I can imagine I have goosebumps right now.
Yeah. And he worries about me. He's very much the conventional life.
Yeah.
Very much. His father started the business. He's known his entire life he'd go into it and be set. And he's really all about just having a safe, lucrative life. Mm-hmm. And he is he is one of my absolute favorite people. He's my brother.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let him down. Mm-hmm. But we are mature enough at this point that he really just wants what's best for me.
Yeah.
And so when I told him this morning, he gave me nothing but love back. So I'm so blessed and so happy, and such a weight off right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, I also think too, what you're touching on, I imagine for a while, when you really got like, okay, this is my purpose. This is what my life looks like. I've got this internal knowing. It doesn't yet match my external reality and this gap. And I think many of us can feel that. And then even just the anticipation, I also know that you've got, a 6-year-old daughter, you've got a wife, you've got a family. Mortgage, there's like real stakes at play, right? It's like, how do I hold this? And is it selfish? Am I grateful? And I think that's real stuff that, that's part of the experience. And I would imagine even, right now there's people that are listening to this that are like, yeah, I feel that. And I don't know how to take that first step. And I wonder too, if you thought, like, even in having the conversation, if you would imagine that conversation, like many times, and like oftentimes listeners would be like, I've got the email written, the resignation, whatever. And I just like, all of that, right?
Yeah. I've had it written for the last probably nine days.
Yeah.
And pressing send, my heart rate, jumped. And then I've got the feature where you can call it back. Undo. And I was like, no, don't undo it. Just go, man. You're in it. And but I really took it to the brink where it was becoming, I wasn't doing well in either. And it was really starting to show up. So I don't feel right. This is my best friend, and I work with many other people as well, but he's the one I care the most about.
Yeah. And
then my business partner, Adrian, he's been full-time for the last year and a half now. And it's just not fair to take from him. And, but I really pushed it to the point where, I've been saving, been doing it smart. My wife is on board. And there were many times a year or two ago or 3 that I just wanted to say, screw this. And I'm just going all in. And if I do that, then my back will be against the wall and I'll have to figure it out. And I'm really glad I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that maybe now, if I had, I'd be further along. But to me, this felt right. With the constraints you mentioned, the family, the mortgage, all that. So
totally. And it isn't always the burn all boats strategy. Isn't right for everyone. And if you could maybe share 1 or 2 quick things before we jump into the rapid fire round, which listeners, stay tuned for that. What would it be in just sitting in that time period of this knowing that it's not full alignment before you actually make the decision, weighing all of the practical pieces, just on how you navigated that, if it was practices that you did, or even just reflective points you had, but any just tips that you could give to someone that's in that process right now?
Yeah, well, I've spent quite a bit of time in the place that enables me to think most clearly, which is nature. And like I said, I've spent quite a bit of time studying how and why. And so I'm able to tap into brain waves and patterns that I know will enable me to create better decisions.
Yeah.
So I've spent quite a bit of time in nature. I've done some like solo spirit quests on my own, and they've all focused on this.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be anything, there's some extreme ones out there, but it could just be an afternoon by a river where you're really just focused on finding those answers. Or it could be a hike and then good food afterward that stimulates your brain. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. So we're going to jump in the rapid fire round. This is 5 laser questions coming at you. And then after, we're going to talk about the giveaway that we've got for one of our listeners. So stay tuned. We've been given some little upcoming attraction previews throughout the episode. So are you ready for this rapid fire round?
Let's do it.
All right.
Fire away.
Question number 1, fill in the blank. If you really knew me, you would know what?
You would know how much I love my daughter, Sienna. Yeah, the greatest gift ever.
Yeah, so good. Next question. What is one surprising and or weird fact that most people don't know about you?
I just spent 1.5 years building a bow and arrow.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like absolute therapy for me. And I worked with a master bow builder, and I'd go to his workshop and he'd have classic rock playing and a bottle of Malbec sitting there, and we'd talk about guy stuff, and I'd work with my hands and work with wood and get dirty. And it was the greatest therapy ever.
Yeah, so good. What is one truth that if you could see it actualized in the world, like that your daughter gets to grow up with, like what would that truth be?
That we are able to truly value nature for what it is and put economic value to it, which I think will then start us on a path of conservation and preservation. And that's my biggest hope. That's my whole purpose.
Yeah, so good. Last question, what does living the unconventional life mean to you?
Being happier than people not living the conventional life. Like, focusing on what's happy, what gets you there. And it means sacrifice too at some points. But with those sacrifices, I think come huge steps, like what we were talking about with your big move.
Totally. I bought a house and transitioning more into family life and all these things. So.
And I was thinking about your transition from
Forbes. Yeah, absolutely. From shifting where this podcast began, with Forbes and writing there into more alignment, outside of that. So totally.
Yeah.
So good. Tell us about the giveaway that you've got. We've been alluding to it for one of our listeners.
Yeah. So. Well, we're going to put together like the absolute supreme pizza of our products, and you'll get everything that we make, which is several $100 value, and we'll throw in some swag.
Ned hats, everyone.
Yeah. And so you'll have some tinctures, you'll have a body butter, all 4 of the lip balms that we create. We actually wild harvest a lot of the ingredients in the mountains up there, and at our botanist and wild harvest spirit guide's house, Annie Miller.
Wow.
Everything's made entirely in Boulder, and it'll be coming to you from Boulder.
Amazing. That's such a generous offer for one of our listeners. Unconventional lifers, head over to unconventionallifeshow.com, click on the giveaway tab. And if you really, really want this giveaway, feel free to send us an email, let us know why, and we'll select one of the listeners and link you up with Ret here. And Ret, for those that want to learn more about NED, and you also do this thing called NED Walks, which we didn't quite talk about a little bit. Give us some context on that and the best ways to stay in touch and follow along on your journey.
Yeah, sure. Well, the best way to find us is at our website, which is helloned.com. So HELLONED.com, NED. And then on Instagram at meetned. And then Ned Walks. Yeah, Ned Walks are one of my favorite part of the business.
Yeah.
So it's about getting people outdoors to reconnect with nature. And these are sort of like mindful walks. It's less about the aerobic or the endurance side of things as
Yeah.
it is about the mental side. So we'll find places to go for a walk in the woods, and we'll tap into the learnings that I've come across along the way, so that we can get to a place where the mind and body is functioning at a super high level.
Yeah, so good. We will put all of those links at the show notes at unconventionallifeshow.com. And Ret, such a pleasure to sit down with you today in the home front in Boulder.
Yeah.
And really see a bit of what you are brewing in our backyard. And for those that are tuning in from some other countries or other parts of the country, it's definitely a special place. And so, yeah, I really appreciate it and love what you're doing. So,
well, I appreciate you and appreciate the platform, and just so grateful to you and all your listeners.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Unconventional Life family. We got more goodies coming at you guys soon.